Full guide to making, publishing, and marketing your first game. Hello, I'm Jacob, and I help young game developers like myself with the lessons I have learned over the years. Have to be honest with you, this is the second time I'm recording this fucking video. I just spent half an hour yapping, so just bear with me. In this video, I will cover the steps involved in publishing your first game, so you can make one without any prior knowledge of game development, and I will cover the following topics: it's where to make your game, 2, and how to code your game, 3, how to draw or model your game, 4 is the workflow, 5, how and where to market, and 6, where to publish. I will leave timestamps for each section in the description. I encourage you to skip through parts that you don't give a shit about. Like, if you're an artist and you know how to draw, skip that part because I'm not going to teach you anything new. Okay, starting from where to make your game. Essentially, what game engine do you want to use? It's not an easy question to answer, and it has many answers. So I will start with the game engines that I really would not recommend using. Don't use any game engine built on Lua or any simple languages. I'm talking primarily here about stuff like Roblox and Core. I've made a lot of Roblox games, and I've made it for a long time. And when I was younger, and if I had spent that time working with a real game engine, I'd probably be working at Activision or EA right now. So why do I hate Roblox so much? I just don't think it's scalable after a while. I wanted to make more complicated games, and because Roblox has a very strict game engine, it didn't allow me to do that. And also the fact that every game on Roblox has to be multiplayer, it teaches you a bunch of stuff that you probably won't need to know for a while. Client-side, server-side connections, remote events, that kind of stuff. I was still trying to adjust to the single-player mechanics months into my Unity career. And same thing goes for engines like Scratch, which I absolutely despise. And I think that leaves you with only a couple of choices. My go-to is Unity. Some people really don't like Unity, but I found it to be very good. I think the main criticism it gets is that it's packed full of too many features, ironically. The reason that's a bad thing is that most people won't use a lot of the features, and they're still in the game when you build it. So that leads to kind of like bulky games that are difficult to make because it's a lot of random things everywhere. But I think a major advantage of Unity is that you can make games for every single platform, down from iOS to Linux servers. So has a lot of options there, and it's also easy to modify stuff. You can add packages directly from GitHub, which is nice. You can make really any modifications you want, from adding ChatGPT to your game to adding the high definition graphics. And another good thing is that you can make both 2D and 3D games, which I think are very good quality, and I think both are very evenly made. So that's nice. And another game engine is going to be Unreal Engine. It's probably the best in terms of 3D graphics, and I think it is the best in terms of 3D graphics. And the games that come out of it are absolutely stunning, especially now Unreal Engine, I think 5.3 has come out. It's absolutely breathtaking, some of them. Only one issue with the Unreal Engine I will find is that its 2D side is not great, and I think it's very lacking when you compare it to Unity or even Godot. That being said, if you just want to make 3D games, then I think Unreal is a very good choice for you. And as I mentioned before, another game engine there is Godot. It's really growing in popularity nowadays. A lot of people have used it since the Unity pricing event. And games like Slay the Spire now, the second sequel to that game, is coming out on Godot. And I think it has both 2D and 3D games, and it has a decent amount of support for languages. Godot has its own script, similar to like Blueprints with Unreal. But I think you can also make games in C++ and C Sharp. I've never actually used Godot, but that's kind of just what I've heard about it. It might be worth a try for you. And those are really the three that I would focus in on. Which one would I pick? I've obviously picked Unity, so that's what my choice is. Why did I pick Unity? Well, I wanted to try making both 2D, 3D, because I wanted to sort of discover which part of game development I would enjoy. I've kind of stuck with the 2D part of it mostly. I tried making 3D games. I didn't like it very much. 2D is now my go-to, and I really like the multi-platform capabilities that Unity has. That's the main reason there. If I was into 3D games, I would, without a doubt, use Unreal Engine, because the graphics are just stunning. In terms of Godot, I've again never tried it, but if you want to make smaller scale games that probably won't scale to like massive levels, like you're never gonna make some Call of Duty on Godot, but if you want to make games like that, Godot is a good choice because it's free, it's open source. You keep all the profits from your game, and you can obviously modify the engine because it's open source. Okay, and if you're a hobbyist, then use whatever you want. I'm more talking about people who are looking to have a career in game development, revenue. If you do want to use Roblox, if you do want to use Scratch, if you want to use Core, then go ahead and do that. I'm kind of focusing in on individuals who are going to be game devs in the future. But anyway, once you pick your game engine, regardless of what it is, you're going to have to commit towards learning it. And at first, it will make no sense. It is an utter slog to change the way you think about games whenever you switch engines. And there is really this temptation to just go back to what you know, to, just go the beaten path. But you can't do that. If you want to be a real game developer, you have to adapt, you have to change your mindset. So you have to just push through that. And summing up this section is just avoid using the simple game engines if you want to be a real game developer like Roblox, Core, and Scratch, and shift to using powerful game engines like Unity, Unreal, and Godot. Pick one of those, focus on it, and don't quit. Okay, moving on to how you will code your game. And let me be clear, this is not a coding tutorial. I will simply give you the tools that you can use to learn how to code. I will explain how I go about solving problems, and then you will have to do it yourself. Okay, so what's the optimum way to learn how to code? Well, I will tell you how I learned how to code. I kind of just dove in at the deep end. You have to go into the unknown, and it feels very strange at first. You kind of feel lost, especially. It's kind of the same thing with the game engine where you're trying something new, you don't know what's happening, your brain doesn't like new things, so it wants to go back to what it knows. You have to simply push through that feeling, you have to embrace it, and you have to familiarize yourself with a new environment. And essentially what I do is I start off by making the simple building blocks for my game first. So I've made a couple of 2D platformers, and in there, the building block is player movement, so jumping, running, sprinting, etc. And at first, I didn't know how to code that, but I was actually very lucky because everything in game development has been done for. And because the internet exists, it means that people make videos about it, like me, and therefore you can go watch the tutorials and you can learn how to make it. So unless you become some kind of industry leader and you're pushing the boundaries of graphics, you're making Unreal Engine 6 or Unity 7, then you're going to find a lot of tutorials, you're going to find people who have the same problems. So that's my go-to for solving my game development issues. So in terms of our 2D platformer example, if you just go on YouTube, you Google how to make 2D platformer movement, you'll have tons of videos to choose from, and select one of those, and just learn from it. And another thing is how I actually became better at coding is I didn't just copy the video. Very important that you follow along with it. So ideally you'd have some kind of second monitor set up. I don't have a second monitor, so I had to just switch back and forth. And you kind of learn more by doing than by watching someone. So what I told myself was that I couldn't actually copy any code. Even when there was some like stuff in the description, I would always type it out myself, just so I got through the experience of sort of doing something with the guidance of someone else. And the last step was that whenever I saw the same problem again, I would first go in and try and solve it myself. The reason I did that instead of just immediately consulting the forums or YouTube was that it improved your problem solving skills. When you thought about the problem, you sort of planned it out, you laid it out, and you recalled what you knew, you would be able to crack that problem. And when you go into the advanced stages of game development, you start making games that might explore new mechanics or that work with things that aren't well documented. You're going to need to develop that problem solving ability, because I think the tutorials only really work to a certain point as well. Okay, let's say you're completely stuck, you can't find a solution, and you've searched as much as you can. This is my 3-step framework to trying to find a solution, so you can follow along with this. Step 1 is consult YouTube. You've probably done that already. We haven't gotten results from that. 2 is to consult forums. So Stack Overflow is a popular one. For me, Unity forums is quite popular as well. And for your game engine, there's probably a forum. So Unity, Unreal forums or Godot forums. So you can go check on those. And in the forums, you want to find people who have similar or the exact same problems. And if you don't find that, you can type the problem in yourself and ask for help. And if somehow that doesn't work, you can't find the same problem or no one's responded to your problem, then you want to move to the last step, which is ChatGPT. It's actually surprisingly effective. I don't know where they pull this data from, because sometimes I'll Google the problem, I can't find anything. Whenever I ask ChatGPT, it has a solution for me, which is interesting. Okay, if you still can't find a solution after doing all that, then it might be a lost cause, to be honest. I would try a different approach or try finding a workaround that might exclude having to solve this problem. So maybe if, I was trying to, force this thing, this animation has to be like this or this has to be like that, maybe you can just not do that, scrap it. And just to recap the steps in this section, dive into the unknown, try and code something you haven't coded before. If you get lost, watch the tutorial, follow along, and lastly, the next time the same problem comes up, try and solve it yourself, which will improve your ability to solve problems in the future. Okay, moving on to the next chapter, how to draw and model your game. I want to preface this by saying that I'm not really a good artist. That being said, I did briefly make all the art for my games, so I will pass on that knowledge and also hopefully teach you how to avoid the traps that I fell into. I would really recommend that, especially for your first game, you start out with something very simple, some kind of 2D pixel art or even 8-bit. 8-bit art especially doesn't have to be that detailed. It doesn't mean that it can't be good. There are pixel artists who make stunning graphics, but I think there's more leeway for beginners because it's very sort of limited resolution. Pixel art is also very popular nowadays. There's loads of very talented artists that choose to do pixel art, so I really doubt you'll be losing that much in terms of graphics. Basically just draw simple characters and simple animations, and then you can start learning from there. If you want to actually become a better artist, it's really quite simple. You just have to start drawing a lot more. The more time you spend sketching, drawing, the better at art you will be. A simple exercise that I used to do is I would, in the evening, just look outside my window. I would see an object like a car or a tree, and I would try and draw it. That way, I had sort of experience every day trying to look at different perspectives, and that did help me a little bit to become a better artist. In terms of software for art, there's really two categories that it falls into. There's the vector-based software, like Inkscape and Adobe Illustrator, and then there's raster-based software, stuff like GIMP and Paint. Oh, the vector-based software is basically art with lines and mattes. Think of it like architectural images. Oh, it falls under the category of stuff like technical graphics and computer-aided design, although it's not quite the same. It's a lot less rigid. I always use this for my UI icons because you can make symmetrical things. You can make it look very nice. Stuff like health bars and buttons as well. The only problem with the vector-based images is it's much harder to detail with them. I also don't like the filters that the vector-based images offer. I don't think they really compare to the raster. And my go-to for this type of software is Inkscape. Inkscape. It's free. It's the main part of it, and I really think it's pretty much as good as Illustrator. So I would always use that over the paid software. And moving on to the raster, that's just when you basically draw images with pixels. So think of Microsoft Paint. And artists use raster for the majority of assets in a game. There's stuff like the main characters, animations, and the environments. As mentioned before, the filters on the raster are a bit better. So if you're trying to scale up the contrast or change the lighting, I really think it works a lot better when you have pixels. You can also generate cool stuff like fractals, so that's nice. The main drawback is when you're making stuff that needs to be symmetrical or lined up like with a ruler, it can be challenging, and I would always use the vector stuff for that. If you've decided for some reason to make a 3D game as your first game, you're going to need to learn Blender or some kind of 3D modeling software. If it's your first game, I don't know why you'd be doing it in 3D, just make a 2D game. But if you've absolutely settled on it, then I think Blender is going to be your way to go. It's free and you can do pretty much anything on it. If you have a lot of money and I guess time to burn, you can get Maya. I don't know why, but you can try that as well. And if you try and make a 3D game as your first game, you will be called a Roblox knockoff. That's just what's going to happen because your models are going to be shite. I would really not recommend doing a 3D game. Start with 2D, please. Key takeaways for this chapter: start out with some simple art, preferably some kind of 2D, 8-bit pixel art. Vector graphics are what you want to use for the UIs, while raster graphics will work for absolutely everything else. And if you're a maniac and you want to make 3D games, then learn Blender. Okay, on to one of my favorite chapters, which is the workflow for game development. And there's sort of two parts to it. There's the systems creation and content creation. And when you start to understand the difference between these two, making a game becomes a lot easier. So if I had to explain it, systems creation is basically all the parts of the game that enable it to function. For example, character movement is a system. So is the dialogue box. So is audio. It's basically the fundamental things that you can't proceed without. This can to some degree be art as well. If you're making generic props that are placed around levels, I would also call that a system. Now, content creation, on the other hand, is really everything the player experiences and plays through. It's the level design, the new upgrades, the missions, basically anything that's visible and the player goes through. Content really can't exist without the systems, and there's really no point of playing a game that just has systems. So you kind of need both of them to actually make a good functioning game. And so with that knowledge, what does this enable you to do? Well, you can actually plan out when you'll be making systems and when you'll be making content, and how you'll approach both of them. Essentially, at the start of a game, I always start making systems because I want to plan out my gameplay. I want to see how to make an MVP or a demo of what the mechanics look like and make sure that it's actually feasible. Then once I have that settled, I can move on to making some kind of first level and some kind of introduction. And that's just so I can test out the gameplay with the content and make sure that everything makes sense. After that, I sort of move on to making more complex systems. Then I make more content for that, and I make more systems, and it kind of goes from there. And there's also a kind of different mindset you have to approach when you're making systems or you're making content. Making content tends to be more straightforward. It also tends to be funner. The more work you put into making your content, the more results you will get out. It's like a linear sort of chart. With the systems, it doesn't really work the same. You can put in hours and hours and hours of work and get absolutely nowhere, or you can put in 10 minutes and everything just works. It doesn't cleanly translate into results, which is a bit annoying. In terms of the software that I use to plan my tasks, I like using Trello. You can set up a simple Kanban board and then just watch a million videos out there about how to use it. I actually have one, so never mind, scratch that, go watch my one. I've been getting a lot into something called Milanote as well. It's mostly good for story planning, and it might be worthwhile for you to check it out as well. If you're using Unity, I implore you to turn on some kind of version control or use GitHub. I managed to delete my entire assets in one of my game once, and it took bloody ages to fix. I tried deleting one of the models inside a folder. I still don't know why. Unity deleted the whole folder instead, so that's lovely. That's pretty much it for this chapter. Just systems creation is everything that relates to the functionality of the game. Content creation is everything that's playable within the game. Start with a systems creation mindset, and then you want to switch to creating the content. And use either Trello or Milanote with the Kanban board to plan your tasks. Okay, the next chapter is going to be all about the marketing side of your game. For your first game, you don't really need to do that much marketing. You should mainly focus on just making the game and then releasing it. But it also would be nice to have some people play it. You're going to want to make at least an Instagram page. And there you want to post the stuff that you're working on. It doesn't have to be an Instagram page. I just prefer Instagram because it's simple to use and a lot of people are on it. And when you do this, you will generate at least some small amount of interest for your game. So maybe 1 or 2 people actually play your first game. And my first experience with marketing was actually through itch.io. They basically let you write devlogs, and some people read it, and supposedly it would attract some kind of community to your game. Don't do this. I've absolutely never seen any success with this. It just sucked up all my time, and I got pretty much nothing back. Same thing goes with GameJolt. I posted on GameJolt, and I got nothing. This has a terrible return on investment, so don't do this. I'm not saying that devlogs in general are bad. If you know the YouTuber Danny Dev, he makes devlog videos, or he made because he just vanished out of nowhere. But his videos got insanely popular, and it was really just him talking about what he made in his games. So pretty much it was just devlogs. So if you can be entertaining and do that, then certainly go ahead and make videos about that. So just to sum up this chapter is to have an active Instagram page to bring activity to your game. Don't bother posting on itch.io or GameJolt or any sort of written devlogs, I think. And if possible, make video devlogs like Danny Dev does. Just be entertaining. Lastly, let's just talk about where to publish your game real quick. If this is your first game, your choices are probably going to be a little bit limited. Chances are your game doesn't meet the benchmark for a lot of sites like Steam, which want actual games on them. But ideally you'd want to have your game on a bigger site because if you have your game on one of those sites, it looks very nice on your portfolio. And if you're trying to make money from your game, then this is also a big thing, as the big sites will net you a lot more revenue. If you're making a mobile game, which is a very bold move for your first game, you're going to want to release it on the Play Store or the App Store. There's pretty much no other alternatives. It does come with a few complications though. For these sites, you're going to need something called a privacy policy. What is a privacy policy? These sites tend to collect data, and with complying with laws, you need to tell the site how you plan to use consumer data. So for that, you need to write something called a privacy policy. You're also going to need a verified account, which you need to send your ID over and also be over 18. So keep that in mind. In terms of the privacy policy, if you do actually settle on making a mobile game as your first game, you might have to pay a freelancer to do it. You can try writing it yourself, but again, if you get in legal trouble and you have a bad privacy policy, and it's a bit tough. Also, it takes absolutely ages to write this stuff, so I would really recommend paying someone to do it for you. The account doesn't take that long to verify, it's just a bit time consuming and boring. But ultimately, your game is going to have to be on some kind of indie site like itch and GameJolt. It's quite easy to release there, so I would pretty much just go for them. Link those sites to wherever you're posting your game. Maybe that's Instagram, maybe that's Reddit, whatever. And then hopefully you will have some people actually play your game. Okay, I'll tell you a story that nobody actually played my first game. It's a little bit sad. It was like a small 2D platformer game that I made with my friend. Therefore, you shouldn't feel too bad about no one playing your first game. Even if you put in a lot of work, you probably won't get that many results back. And I think it's really just down to getting more experience and just not giving up. Now, the key takeaways from this chapter: just try and get your game on a big platform at first, like Steam, Epic Games, Play Store. Otherwise, just release it as everyone else does on itch and GameJolt. If nobody plays your game, then really don't feel too bad about yourself. It happened to me as well, so it probably will happen to you as well. Well, that's the end of this very long guide, which I had to record twice. I've been talking for over an hour. You've probably forgotten everything. I've forgotten everything too. So let's just sum up each section with one sentence. Number 1, use a scalable game engine like Unity or Unreal. Avoid using Roblox, Scratch, or Core. Dive headfirst into the coding, consult YouTube tutorials if you get stuck, and then learn from that experience. Start out with simple 2D art and draw as much as possible to become a better artist. Switch between the systems creation and content creation mode and plan your tasks with Milanote or Trello. Create a small Instagram community around your game. Try posting on YouTube with devlogs as well. And 6, publish on Steam if possible, otherwise publish your game on itch.io and GameJolt. If you've made it this far, you've watched the whole video through, you actually probably have an attention span that's longer than about 99% of people. It's much longer than mine as well, so very good on you. If you found value in this video, please consider subscribing. The top links in the description are my Instagram and itch.io pages. So go drop me a follow there. I'm now praying that this video actually recorded. And thank you so much for listening.